So I want to talk the accelerator pump circuit of a Holley Carburetor, because I think this is what people mostly have issues with, and I never have really touched on it that well. So when you start messing around with your carburetor here, ignore my throttle cable hooked on by a zip tie. This is the farm truck. So what you want to do is make sure that you have no play here in this arm that goes to your accelerator pump. So as you can see, I have no play, but you also don't want to be in a position where it's slightly down, where it's already pressing on the pump. So you want to be right there, so when you hit the throttle, it's spraying fuel the instant the throttle moves, but you don't want it to be have any pre-duration going on. So the other thing that you mainly will mess with is the squirt nozzle, and I'll post a picture here so you know what I'm talking about. But basically they're numbered, and most Holleys vacuum secondaries like these, I think, come with a 31. So, and usually with these street vehicles that are fairly mild, you're usually around 28 to 35. Usually the heavier vehicles that can't handle a bigger fuel load because they don't have enough mechanical advantage will they'll usually run a smaller squirt nozzle. So, and a squirt nozzle doesn't dictate how much fuel goes in. That's more dictated by the pump cam and the pump cam diaphragm, which there is 50cc diaphragms. This is a 30cc right now, and most vehicles run best with the 30cc, so unless you're real radical. But anyway, so they don't really adjust how much fuel, it's more the duration. Obviously a bigger number will be more fuel sooner, and a smaller number will be less fuel but more throughout the it'll last longer. So and also, even if you have a heavy vehicle but you have a gear ratio that has a pretty good mechanical advantage, like I got a 5-speed in this truck with 411 gears, so I'm running a 35 squirt nozzle. So basically, and when you change those, they have O-rings and they can drop into your intake and stuff, so I always recommend taking the carburetor off to do that. So generally you only need to make one change ever. So usually the 31's fine. So what I like to focus on is the pump cam. Basically, if you have too big of a squirt nozzle, it'll be a bog off the line. You'll know either way. So, but what I more like to do is focus on this pump cam, and basically position 1 is more fuel. I have mine in position 2. It's more fuel. It's more for people to idle down lower, 600 or 700, and the position 2 is more for a higher idle, like 800 to 1,000. A surefire way to also know that you have the wrong squirt nozzle in your engine is if you're running in position 1 here on the throttle shaft, on your throttle lever here, if you're running in position 1, you're idling at something high like 1,000, you need position 1 for it to perform correctly, then you know that there's something that's more of a band-aid, and you can gain more performance because there's something wrong up here in your squirt nozzle. So you really want to pay attention to what you're idling at versus what hole you're using. So again, number 1 hole is more for a lower idle, it's more fuel, which is not always better for all instances, so you really want to keep to the parameters of why you'd use that hole. And then hole 2 is for a higher idle, and it's less duration out of the fuel. So, and you can get different pump cams, and they're as simple as just unscrewing this screw and it falls right out, and you slide a different one in there. So you may have to adjust your arm over here depending on your pump cam change. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fire it up, and I'll misadjust it, and you can see what it's like to have it out of adjustment, and then I'll adjust it back, and you'll be able to tell just by the sheer RPM and throttle response and how the engine bucks in this engine bay. You'll be able to tell. So we'll go ahead and give a real world application here. So we got our engine pretty warmed up here, I usually like to be a little warmer than this, about 160, but we're running about 140, 150, and I'm gonna rebuild this engine in about a month or so, so I'm not too concerned about it. But what we can see here is that when our accelerator pump is adjusted correctly, we really have good throttle response, and what really shows how good it is with a good two-step system. So if you can rev it, and then when it's in the RPMs, tap it again, and it responds and doesn't fall on its face, that's a good sign that it's adjusted correctly. So what you want to see is something like this. So you can see that we got a good responsive throttle snap out of the truck. And another good thing to look at is actually have someone maybe look at your tailpipes when you rev your engine. So if you see any black smoke puffing out, it's a surefire sign that you have something probably adjusted a little too on the rich side on the accelerator pump circuit. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust this pump cam into the wrong position for my idle speed, and we'll get a good look at how that what it looks like when it responds incorrectly. Here's just another view of the engine responding like it should, so you can see it in the engine bay. So you don't want to see any stumble or hesitation in the motor itself, so we'll go ahead and adjust it incorrectly now. So now I have the pump cam adjusted into position 1, which is supposed to be for a lower idle situation. This truck idles higher, so we'll get a good example of what happens when your accelerator pump circuit is too rich. So we'll go ahead and fire up the truck now. Okay, so we got the truck running. We're going to go ahead and give it some throttle snap here. When it stumbles, that's because I have too much fuel going in the RPMs. And you can also see this. I'll puff some black smoke out my tailpipe at the same time. Alright, I'll go take a look at the motor and we'll see the motor hesitate. We're not achieving that same RPM throttle snap with the same throttle position. So anyway, it's definitely imperative that you have your accelerator pump adjusted correctly, especially with these Holleys, which are great carburetors, but if they're not adjusted right, they really do not run right at all. So anyway, something to take into consideration next time you got your hood open, you're playing with your carburetor.